I'm Dave Sorensen, and I'm pastor at Community of Faith, just two doors down. And if you don't like this topic tonight, you could blame me. So in the last several months especially, my heart has been heavy, just as in my position as a dad, as a husband, as a pastor in the community, how to approach politics given it's hitting so many people on a visceral level where people get upset either on the left or the right or in between. And I've watched how it affects people. I've seen how it can create havoc in relationships. How it can divide people so they're not even willing to talk with one another. Or as soon as they bring up the term Democrat or Republican, you immediately get labeled, and you might not be spoken to if you're on the dark side or something like that, right? And so for me, this has been central to something I've wanted to be able to get some good teaching on, have some open, good conversation about. And because as a parish pastor, I've been able to see and witness on both sides of the aisle how we can not be a good representative of Jesus Christ by the way that we talk with one another when it comes to politics. So this hits at a pretty personal level for me. And I want to be able to be a person where if someone disagrees with me on a political spectrum, being some on the other side of persuasion when it comes to politics, I want to be able to sit down and talk to them. I want to be able to let them know that I care about them, even though I disagree with them. And I think during the pandemic, given that we spent so much time on media, finding ourselves so isolated for such a long time, that we started listening to particular news networks. We'd go to media platforms that would be like an echo chamber, things that we agreed with, and we would stay within that echo chamber, and then it made it very difficult to talk to people that were on a different side of the aisle. And I think this is also important because, I'll just get a show of hands. How many of you have relatives or friends that don't share the same political part of the aisle? Okay, by the show of your hands, I will say then this conversation is critically important. We have to find a way to be able to talk with people that don't have the same political persuasion. And so that's why we're here. And I'm here to learn with you, I'm here to grow with you, and I hope that this type of conversation that we have would open ourselves to have better conversations with people that don't see things in a similar fashion. Okay? So with that, I would like to reintroduce you to a new friend of mine. This is Dr. Paul Metzger. He's at Multnomah University. And if you look at his bio, you could get the glasses that I have. I have to get reading glasses. And I have to spend probably 5 minutes reading his bio because there's so much in it with all the things that he's done for the glory of God on his biography and what he's doing in community. And so I am so thankful that he's here again. And so let's give him a very warm welcome. Okay, here you go.
Thanks, Pastor Dave. It's great to be with you again. I really enjoyed the last time I was here with you with Dr. Potter, where we're dealing with faith, science, ethics issues. And as you know, we're dealing with politics and faith tonight. And I think, for us, I hope the beverage of choice will be helpful to you. because, this can lead to indigestion. We're not supposed to talk about religion and politics over dinner, right? And here we are talking about religion and politics over dinner. I'm waiting to have my dinner afterwards because I'm going to get indigestion just talking about this thing. So hopefully your drink is as good as mine, and that'll help you recover from my talk. So yeah, cheers to you. So can you hear it okay when I'm down here too, or does it I have to keep it up here? It's better? Okay. So, all right. So again, looking forward to this. This is an area of profound interest, I think, to all of us. As you were raising your hands just a minute ago, you have family and friends. I have family and friends who don't share my views. And this can lead us, if we're parents, it can lead us to divisions with our kids or our siblings or our parents, depending on where we are on the spectrum. And in our churches, so many churches are made up of people simply of the same political orientation, which I think is actually sad. I think it's really sad, a sad state of affairs. I think if Jesus doesn't bring people together from across the spectrum, I don't know why we need Jesus. Jesus was kind of crazy. How many of you are part of a church? Anyone part of a church? Okay, I'm part of a church network. But Jesus does what's called church growth in a very funny way. Church growth is often you get people of the same socioeconomic feather together, whatever that might be, and then they flock together. Jesus, you know how crazy he was in his own strategy for leadership and growing a movement? He actually had a zealot and a tax collector in his inner circle of disciples. Does anyone know what a zealot was about? Zealots were anti the Roman Empire. They were anti-Jewish people identifying with Rome. Tax collectors, on the other hand, guess what they were seen as being involved with at times? As collaborators, compromisers with Rome. So Jesus had Matthew the tax collector and Simon the zealot in his inner circle. That's a crazy way to build a movement because that's not birds of a certain socioeconomic feather. So he had to have his sleeping bag every night between these two guys. Because you know what zealots would do to tax collectors? They'd slit the throat. Possibly what tax collectors would do to zealots and everyone else is take from their pockets. So he had to, in a sense, mediate between these two, but that's exactly what Jesus comes to do, is mediate, to reconcile, to bring people together who have strong differences. It doesn't mean we have to give up key differences. I don't think I have to give up key differences from others to somehow be connected to them. I'll probably mention a little bit later Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has had a huge influence on my thinking. He talked about the beloved community. And beloved community included enemies. And that's exactly what the heart of the good news of Jesus Christ is about. It's enemy love. Enemy love. So we'll talk about that tonight. Politics matters. I really appreciated the intro that was given in terms of the blurb for tonight. How not to get angry with people who differ from you. It doesn't mean we shouldn't have strong differences at points. So this is not a talk about give up your differences. It's how do we hold firmly to relationship while holding firmly to our differences. Does that make sense? Because this is really about possible ways of engaging. Pastor Dave, I think, was modeling that tonight, that he wants to learn. He wants to be inquisitive, not to be inquisitional. You know what the Inquisition was about? If you know Monty Python, don't ever talk about the Spanish Inquisition. But to be inquisitional means you're in attack mode. Inquisitive is a different posture, right? I'm here to learn. That's what he was talking about. It's to have a humble posture, not posturing. Now, I'm not claiming I've got this down. I don't, because I hold my views very strongly, whatever they might be on whatever subject. So it's not about weakening our positions. It's how to hold strong positions and hold to strong relationships. I think both can be done, though it's hard. And that's what we're after here, I believe, tonight. If not, still, by all means, get another drink. That'll help you endure me. But politics matters. This is not about being anti-political. I think politics matters. Now, politics goes back, in our context, to the Greeks with polis, the city. Aristotle, in his works, talks about the polis, the city-state. And it was how to develop a virtuous citizenry for the sake of human flourishing. And that's what politics is supposed to be about. It's about how do we have a virtuous citizenry for the sake of flourishing of society. I hope that doesn't sound too much like mumbo jumbo, but politics is a good thing. It's to bring people together, not necessarily to agree at every time, but to have an orderly system of governance for the sake of flourishing of a populace. In the East, and I'm just finishing up an ethics book where I deal with Western and Eastern thought forms, including Confucianism and Buddhism, and and of course, Western thought forms as well. But Confucius was also about political order, and he was about morality, that the king or the emperor would be about morality, not about being profitable as such, but about being moral and developing a moral citizenry, not per se a profitable citizenry in terms of just affluence. Moses was also, in terms of the theocracy of the Jewish people, about a certain form of governance. It is about governing to bring about a right order of virtuous flourishing in society. And you can always come back to me later and ask questions, challenge me. I'm all for that, okay? So hopefully I'm not being too obtuse. Just a little obtuse is okay, because your drinks can handle that. But hopefully not overly so. Now, Jesus was political. Jesus was very political. How many of us think about Jesus as being political? I think for a lot of people that seems very, almost oxymoronic. Do you ever think about that? Jesus was political? Jesus was more conservative than the conservatives and more liberal than the liberals. Jesus never fit anyone's boxes. And I think if we try to put Jesus in our mode, we're deeply mistaken. I put myself in that box. I think I try to make Jesus fit my system of thought. He refuses to go there. Won't do it. A friend of mine, Don Miller, wrote a book where he talks about, I think it was in Searching for God Knows What, talks about Jesus comes to earth, draws a circle around himself, and says everybody's outside of that. Now, I'm not saying Jesus is inside or outsider, but the point is we shouldn't be presumptuous to think we've got God on our side or God in our back pocket. Whether we're conservative or liberal or somewhere in between, Jesus ain't playing to that fiddle. But Jesus was political. So I'm just going to quote some verses because I'm supposed to do that as a theologian. So I say this for the camera, for my institution of higher learning, okay? I do know a few verses. It's the same verses I constantly quote. Okay, so let's just think for a few minutes, if you don't mind. Sermon on the Mount. Sermon on the Mount. Matthew chapter 5 through 7, compare that with Luke chapter 6, Sermon on the Plain. Different context, some overlapping themes. So I'm just talking about Jesus political. I first started talking about politics is a good thing. That was my first point after Pepto-Bismol and, tranquilizers and things of that sort. Now I'm talking about Jesus was political. Politics is a good thing per se, quite possibly. Jesus is political. So that's where I'm at right now, okay? Just getting things warmed up. And we have till 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. So Matthew chapter 4, Jesus says something that could be very destabilizing. He says, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And if you're a Roman centurion, you're wondering, what is he talking about? Kingdom. That would be upsetting to the Roman hierarchy, quite possibly. Kingdom, there's only one kingdom, and that's Caesar's kingdom. And they didn't want to see these Jewish people get too acclimated to talk about messiahs and kingdoms. Right out of the gate, his public ministry says, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And then he goes about healing people of every disease and sickness, casting out demons, doing the whole works. And people are
starting to wonder, who is this, right? I mean, that's what we should all be asking if we're reading the Gospels. Who is this? If we live with a sense of wonder reading the Bible, who in the world is this? And so they're following Jesus. You know, these are people who probably only had one set of clothing and they were wearing it. Probably were living from, they didn't have refrigeration. So they're just going from meal to meal. And they're thinking, they're hanging on his words because they see what he's done. So he goes up on a mount, chapter 5. Moses went up on a mount in the Hebrew scriptures, and he got the law, right? If you know Charlton Heston, the Ten Commandments, right? Goes up on a mount to get the law. Jesus goes up on a mount to do what? Not to get the law, but to give the law. And I think this could be seen as the new Moses. He sits down, his disciples come to him, and he starts teaching the crowds, the disciples, but also the crowds are listening in. And he says right at the outset, now tell me what you think about this. Would you vote for him? He says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." So he starts out, verse 3, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Verse 10, blessed are those who are persecuted, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That's a literary envelope. I'm not trying to get too technical here, but everything in between goes in that envelope. And he's saying the kingdom of heaven, he's describing it, and he's saying, who wants to be a part of my citizenship base? Because this is my State of the Union address. This is what God's kingdom looks like. That he said, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And now he's describing. He's not defining it. He never really quite defines it. He describes it. And he says, this is what it looks like. Blessed are the poor in spirit. I don't know if I like that one. I mean, I'm trying to pick and choose which of Jesus' Beatitudes I like. I'm not crazy really about any of them, if I'm honest with you. I mean, because blessed are the poor in spirit, you know what that means? John Stott, a leading Anglican minister in London, England, died several years ago, said it means spiritually bankrupt. I had a banker student in class my first year, and I quoted Stott. He about lost his breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Because bankruptcy, how many of you are bankers? How many of you declared bankruptcy? You don't have to say anything about that one. But that's not seen as a good thing in our culture, right? Bankruptcy is not a good thing. Chapter 11, Chapter 13, I was part of a company once that went Chapter 11. It wasn't a good situation for employees or employer or those who had purchased, who didn't get their goods, right? So, blessed are the spiritually bankrupt. Jesus says, you're blessed. So if we want to be a part of Jesus' kingdom community, it entails this sense of, I'm desperate for God to show up. That kind of is about humility, which I think Pastor Dave was talking about, which is kind of a challenge for me. I mean, I know I'm humble. And you know, as soon as I think I'm humble, guess what? I've just lost it. I just lost it. But Jesus says, blessed are those who are crying out to God. You know the story of the Pharisee and the tax collector? The Pharisee said, God, thank you didn't make me like this bloke. What was the tax collector saying? God, have mercy on me. And Jesus said, guess who went home justified that day? A lot of people would probably have thought, his disciples probably thought, the Pharisee, because he was such a religious purist. No, it's the tax collector, because he realized how desperate his need for God was. If I sense going into my discussions and debates with people who differ from me that I'm not so righteous, and we're going to talk about Jonathan Haidt. Some of you may be familiar with the social psychologist Jonathan Haidt. He's had some influence on my thought. He talks about we're all self-righteous. We all have this kind of righteous mind, a famous book he wrote, The Righteous Mind. We all think we've got it, they don't, whoever they are, across the spectrum. That's a danger. That's a danger. And we've got a lot of that. And I've got it. I mean, I've got to be honest with you. I know what I'm talking about, but living it is a little bit harder. It's a little bit harder for me. So I'm just saying that's the first of Jesus' politics. So Jesus does politics differently. I didn't say he does it the same way we do. I said he's more conservative than the conservatives. He's more liberal than liberals. And he's calling all of us to repent, to respond. And I think Jesus is so intoxicating and Jesus is so magnetizing. Why don't we trust him more in our congregations rather than leaving churches to go elsewhere to some place where we have the same affiliation, the same socioeconomic, same ethnic, same whatever demographic group? That doesn't give Jesus much time to be Jesus, because we're trying to make sure Jesus doesn't have to show up. I'm really forthright about this point, because I do like to associate with people who think the way I do, who kind of confirm my biases, because then I get to stay in control, which is part of the problem. Okay, so I'll probably come back to this with Jesus being political, but there are so many of those beatitudes. They're not platitudes. What's the difference between a platitude and a beatitude? We say these are Jesus' beatitudes. It means honorable teaching. Beatitudes, the blessed teaching. What's a platitude, by the way? What's a platitude? And we tend to look at the beatitudes the same way as platitudes, because we've heard them, like, blessed are the meek. How many of you have seen Monty Python? Different one than the Spanish Inquisition. Life of Brian. That's where I learned all this stuff, okay? So Life of Brian, one of my favorite accounts of Scripture. You know, Jesus is out there on the hill, right? The Sermon on the Mount, he's doing this talk. You should watch it. It's a great clip. If you haven't seen it, go find it tonight on YouTube. Leave this talk right now. Go into the highways and byways and watch. Yeah, please, it's worth it. I'm telling you, it's better than this. So Jesus is off in the distance. They can't hear him. And they think, he said, blessed are the cheesemakers. And they're trying to figure, well, some Pharisee says, well, you know, he's really talking about dairy products or things like that. And they're saying, and then he says, you know, blessed are the meek. And someone says, oh, that's wonderful. They're having such a horrible, I mean, they use different words, but I mean, they're having such a horrible time. So I'm glad the meek gets something. And, you know, Brian's mom says, Brian, let's go to the stoning. Let's go to the stoning. It's more interesting than listening to this book. I just love Monty Python, how they do that little spiel. But, you know, when we think about Monty Python's rendition, it can almost come across as a platitude. That, you know, the Beatitudes, they've been said so often, they've kind of lost all meaning. And Friedrich Nietzsche talked about truth as a dead metaphor. We forget it's only a metaphor, and we fixate it and fossilize it as truth. And so we hear the Bible so often, and we think, okay, because I've heard it and I know it, then I get it and I live it, and maybe that's not true. G.K. Chesterton said, and I'm still on the point Jesus was political. I haven't left anything, okay? I'm still on that point. Monty Python, I talked about. G.K. Chesterton, famous Catholic apologist, wrote, the Christian life, the Christian faith, has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried. It has not been tried and found wanting. It's been found difficult and left untried. And so when I think about blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, Dr. King lived meekness out, and look what that got him. It's not an easy life. It's satisfying in one sense. You'll be satisfied for hungering and thirsting in righteousness. But the point is, it's destabilizing. But a platitude is kind of like The Simpsons. How many of you are familiar with The Simpsons? Homer, Marge. He sends up this space rocket, kid's space rocket. It goes haywire. Mr. Squirrel, or I forget if it's any Simpson experts, there's a little creature like squirrel or chipmunk that has to parachute out, Mr. Chipmunk or Mr. Squirrel, and it's taking a downward spiral, and it runs into it crashes into their church, burns the church. Marge says, that's the worst thing you've ever done. And he goes, you say that so often it's lost all meaning. That's a platitude. And we can easily confuse the Beatitudes with it, but the Beatitudes are something that they wrestle with us, they push against us, they were to try them on for size and to really struggle through them. And so blessed are the peacemakers, not blessed are the peacekeepers. Blessed are the peacemakers. And you know what happens to peacemakers? Next verse, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness, for they are part of the kingdom of heaven. So peacemaking, not peacekeeping, we're called to peacemake. And that includes over politics with zealots and tax collectors. I'm just saying Jesus is all about engaging politics, but it's his kingdom politics that intersects Jewish and Roman and other sectors, and the rest is history, and the rest is present tense. Am I making any sense whatsoever on these points about Jesus being political so far? Does that make any sense? Okay, yes, sir.
Quick question, just can you differentiate peacemaker and
Yeah, because I think peacemaking, I'll use King again. His Christmas sermon, 1967, December 67, he talked about, though you burn our churches, though you kill our children, and he's thinking of historical accounts. His house was bombed. You know, his own kids and his wife were at risk there. I believe they were in there at the time. Though you do these things, instead of hating you, we will love you back. And we're going to win because we're going to win you over. Our love for you as enemies is going to be so strong that in the end, when we win, he says, we're going to win you over, so it's a double victory. That's peacemaking. Peacekeeping is how to keep a stable status quo. It can even be, I'm all for tolerance. Tolerance is a good thing. Like the coexist bumper stickers, they have their place. But tolerance in Portland can also be a form of indifference. We've got to have more than mere tolerance, as important as it is, because we shouldn't kill people. That's why tolerance developed in the modern period, because people were killing one another over baptism views, and Catholics and Protestants. So it was a good thing in the Enlightenment period that people created an emphasis on tolerance. But tenacious love requires that we do more than peace keep. We're about reconciliation. We're about reconciling people that enemies somehow become friends. Am I making some sense? And feel free to ask questions throughout, because that'll keep it from getting too boring. So, ask questions, make comments. Okay? So, just Jesus is political. Does that make sense so far, at least the way I'm framing it? Okay. So now I'm going to get more into what I'm going to talk about next step by way of moving toward some aspects of social psychology with Jonathan Haidt here in a few minutes. But I think we need to be about right reasons, right passions, and right practice. Right reasons, right passions, and right practice. You know, conspiracy theories are on the left and the right and the left. I interviewed someone who has written for Oxford Press on conspiracy theories. I mean, Watergate was a conspiracy theory that was found to be true. It was a conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theories themselves per se are not bad. The question is, are we going to analyze where it's before a court of public discourse to see if it can be proven to be true? We've heard a lot about shadow state and things of that sort. Conspiracy theories are not per se, people will mock. And I hear it more on the left right now, like, oh, they're just conspiracy theorists. This guy, I don't even know where he is. He's a University of Miami, writes for Oxford Press about this. Fascinating figure. But he's saying people on the left have conspiracy theories, people on the right have. Watergate was one. I think what happened in Russia was another one. You know, more on the left, so to speak, about Russia. Now, the question is not, does someone hold a conspiracy theory? Is the conspiracy actually true? Oliver Stone, JFK, is that factual? Now, we can say we can debate that, okay? But I'm just saying we have to be about right reasoning. Right reasoning. And with that, the point that comes home to me, and this helps me in various fields of interest, like with, as I said to you last time, my son is completely dependent on others for his care. I said that my son had a catastrophic brain injury, January 21. And I think our society, in some ways, metaphorically speaking, is on life support. I do think democracy is in peril. And I think I can say that without being acclimated toward the left or the right. I think it's a huge issue in our society. We can debate that, but I think it really is. I think the factionalism on all sides is deeply disturbing. We don't have a sense of the common good, and I think that's key for democracy. There's a lack of trust, and we have to cultivate it somehow. But with my son's situation, I have to navigate all the time on medical matters and other matters that I can't discuss. And I'm not a wilting violet, and push comes to shove, I could easily run over people when I'm under stress. Now, how do you think that's going to work for me in advocating for my son long term? I mean, I might win the battle, but I'm definitely going to lose the war in advocating for him. How many of you are familiar with War and Peace? It's a Christian short story that came out last year by Leo Tolstoy. So Tolstoy, right back, what was it, the late 19th, early 20th, wrote this book, War and Peace. And one of my favorite lines is where the Russians, against Napoleon, right? That's the context. Decide, he's thinking back in history to Napoleon. The lead general decides we're going to give up our key cities and pull the French into the Siberian winter, the wilderness. He says it's best for us to lose a few battles to ultimately win the war. Hitler wasn't a good student of history. He did the same thing, by the way. That's another talk next time. Okay, say what you want about say what you want about National Socialism, but at least it's got an ethos. How many of you know that? What movie is that from? No. It's The Big Lebowski. It's my favorite Christian movie. So all that said, more seriously, I have to be about right reasoning, and with this, I need to make sure I don't get personal with people or make it about personalities. I have to be staying on point, pursuing truth, making points, not enemies. If I'm about personalities, like aligning myself with a personality, or if I'm about getting personal with someone in arguing, it's no longer about truth. It's no longer about what is right. I'm just trying to win. When I'm trying to get personal with someone and not staying, quote unquote, it's hard to do, objective, I'm going to go off line or go off track quite quickly. So I have to make points without making enemies.
That's just not happening right now.
It's not. And I have a pastor friend, similar DNA to you, Pastor Dave, who tells me all the time, Paul, make your points, don't make enemies. Because at the end of the day, what's that going to do for my son if I'm working in the healthcare industry and I'm making enemies left and right? Is that going to help my son with advocacy for his care? No. I have to think long-term, not short-term. So this is something, if our culture's on life support, like in a sense my son is, with the G-tube, the trach, constant care, I think there's a parallel. I have to do this in every area of my life. So you just came back from Thanksgiving dinner, right? I'm assuming so, right? Maybe you had conversations over dinner or while watching a football game or washing dishes or just relaxing where you got into a conversation with someone, right? Because we just came out of a very political season. We're not even done, right? There's still Senate runoffs and such. No doubt you got upset at times, right? It's easy to do. And I don't think there's anything wrong with getting upset. I mean, feelings, it's what I do about it when it starts rising up within me. I can't control the fact that I feel so. I can control what I do with the feeling, but that I feel angry, I don't think is so much the issue. It's what I do with that feeling that I don't allow it to control me, right? I mean, this is just common sense, I think. I mean, you can say, no, it's not. But I think it's common sense. So these are points, not all of which are about Bible or social psychology. Some of it is just good conflict resolution skills. I was mentored by the former fire chief of Portland, Bob Wall, and he said to me years ago, Paul, when you're under stress, your default conflict style comes up. So when you're under stress, you learn a lot about yourself. Think back to when you had that conversation. I hope I'm making sense here, because I'm now talking about moving toward right reasoning. So I'm in a conversation with someone over Thanksgiving after dinner or something like that, and I get upset with what they say about this candidate or that candidate, this politics party or that party, this issue or that issue. And if you're under stress, what's your default? You don't have to tell me what your default is, but what are some options that people might have? When they're under stress, they default to their conflict strategy of choice. They don't even know they're doing it. Can you think of some examples of how people are wired? Attack, avoid, criticize, defensiveness, all kinds of things. He said to me, Paul, your default, and you need to develop more tools in your toolkit for conflict resolution, Paul. You're a hammer, everything else is a nail. And I said, now, by the grace of God, God's been working on me for several years. I have to guard, I have to be self-aware that when I'm feeling that, I don't take up the hammer. I'm talking about ideological, metaphorical hammer, right? Not a literal hammer. And just try and come down hard on the matter. Doesn't work with my kids. Doesn't work with my spouse.
Keep trying.
Yeah, it doesn't work. The only time that works is if, like, I teach right across on Gleason Avenue, which is a pretty busy street up in Portland. If a kid's running across the street in heavy traffic, you don't dialogue. You get the kid out of the street. That's fire chiefs have to be about getting people out of burning. You don't dialogue, you pull them out. So it's an emergency situation, but I think we have to develop diverse strategies. So please be, and you know this probably far better than I, we need to learn to be self-aware. What's my default go-to tool when I'm under stress? And how do I respond, or do I react? Do I react or do I respond? So I need to be about right reasoning at every turn, pursuing facts. It doesn't mean I know all the facts. That's an important distinction, because I think I don't always know or often know the facts. And I think the facts can sometimes be beyond us. I think we can get there, but it's hard work. It's really hard work. But if I'm not pursuing facts, then I'm going to easily go off toward getting personal with people. Making points, pursuing points that are reasonable helps me not making it personal with people. Does that make any sense? So just to get clarity, I mean, we can disagree with my point, but am I at least making sense on the point? Okay. Notice the pastor has to be the one, because he knows what it's like when he's standing out there, right? You have to be the one, you know, it's like Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon. I think we're having this great, it's helpful. Yes, sir.
So if I understand what you're saying, it's like the Stephen Covey saying, seek to understand.
Hello.
It's like the Stephen Covey response, seek to understand before you're understood. My question is when the thing that the person is trying to make you understand is so wrong, you can't even, I mean, I can parrot, I can repeat back what they say, I can paraphrase, I can say what I think they're saying, and I can list all the things that they're saying. But when what they're saying is so far out of the ball field, it makes no sense at all. It's difficult for me to understand or seek to understand before I am understood. I have a really difficult time with that. I don't know, anybody else?
I can give you a great answer. I will say, without the preaching, I'll tell you my answer for it, because I've come across that. Brother Elder, pray.
And do you have the mic? Can we get some?
Just because you nodding your head doesn't mean yes, you're absolutely right. I had a very hard time with this until, a couple of years ago when somebody kind of coached me with, well, doesn't mean you're saying they're right, Gretchen. You just shut up and be glad you're not going home with them. Because arguing with them isn't going to win. So unless they're saying, and don't you agree with me? Then you don't really have to say, you know what, you're so dead wrong.
Yeah, and I might think they're dead wrong, but they might not be dead wrong. I'm not going to get into this at length, but epistemologically, I'm just throwing a word out there. I'm a critical realist, or at least I hope to be. I think there's real truth out there. I don't think I always know that. I think it's sometimes beyond me to know what the truth is. So as hard as it is, and I'm not, and you might be right on target, they might be way off, but usually Rome's not built in a day anyway. It's going to take time to even have, it's not a one-off conversation, it's not two, it's not three, because these convictions that we have, they're so deep-seated, and I don't even think they're about reason at times. I think we have to be rational, and that's going to lead us into the point about moral intuitions and affections. These are held deeply in our hearts emotionally, and to untangle that is extremely hard. So you might be right on target in your disagreement with them. I don't even know the situation. And I've felt that many times, and I will feel that many times. I still have to be willing to say, I think they're dead wrong, but they might be right on target and I might be off. I think I have to account for that. I have to acknowledge that possibility. I mean, I'm willing to admit that maybe Jesus didn't rise bodily from the dead. Okay? Now, I don't believe that for a minute. But anyone who's not willing for that to be challenged, I question the integrity of their faith. The Apostle Paul said, if Jesus be not raised bodily from the dead, my faith is full. He was willing. They were willing for it to be called into question. I don't have to hide from something. So I need to be open to the possibility I could be wrong, even on the things that I hold most true. And part of the problem in our society, on the left and the right and the left, is we're not even willing to admit that we could be wrong. And that's not a statement, sir, about anything you just said. I'm just saying this is part of it about, the idea of blessed are the poor in spirit, and blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek. There's a posture, not a posturing, but a posture of like, I'm screwed up. And I, Paul Louis Metzger, am screwed up. If you know me well enough, you might already get a sense of it. I'm kind of hanging by a very thin thread even right now. And I kind of like that. But the point I'm trying to get at is I think we have to at least be willing to admit, even if it doesn't mean you should think that, or I should think that I'm wrong, I know I'm wrong. Why would you hold your position if you knew you're wrong? But I have to at least admit I could be wrong. If we're not, we can't really have a discourse. We're just waiting for them to shut up so we can tell them what's really the truth. And that's not the American experiment on democracy. If we really go back to the way it was set up, we don't have discourse by and large. We have sound bites. This has been a problem that's been going on for decades. Lincoln and Douglas. How many of you have read the book Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman? You know how long Lincoln, who's my favorite president and probably my favorite orator besides King in American society, great public theologians with Jonathan Edwards, 14 hours he and Douglas debated. One day. And that was entertainment. We can't even stay for a tweet. Because, our thought, it's like Sesame Street. Nothing against Sesame Street per se, but it's like we've oversimplified. And it's been going on. The problem we have politically today is we've been oversimplifying for way too long, and it's becoming more and more of a problem. We have to enter into reasoned discourse. I was faulty on this. I have this book on ethics coming out. I'm not a big fan of Richard Dawkins, the author of The Selfish Gene. Brilliant man. But I used term. I didn't even know I was doing it. But I was challenging his view on someone, a fetus with a disability, Down syndrome, hypothetical scenario. And then I said, the one who's really disabled in their thinking here is Richard Dawkins. And fortunately, the copy editor caught it and said, here you are using disability as a weapon. I don't think that's what you want to do. But I was doing the very thing that I was, and it's like, I'm guilty of this at times. I need to grow in this. I need to get better at public discourse. So, excellent point. That's our struggle. That is my struggle. Now, these points, I don't expect for you that this is going to be rocket science. I know every point I'm making tonight. That doesn't mean I live it. The living part is the harder part. The knowing it is easy. I'm still trying to figure out how to make points without making enemies. Oh, you were agreeing with me. Okay. Yeah, someone's got to give this fine young lady a mic. So.
I was going to say, what keeps going through my mind when you're talking about you have to admit that you're wrong or you could possibly be wrong. I understand all that. But it seems like when you're having this discussion, and once you do that, then they take it and run with it, and do you know what I'm saying? It's like you have compromised away your moral code or your ethics or whatever it is, because so much of the conversation anymore is not one candidate versus another candidate or one political philosophy versus another. So much of it is culturally. And so it seems like, when you're talking, and I'm thinking to myself, and, different discussions I've had with people, that once you say that,
Say what? I'm sorry.
once you say, well, I could possibly be wrong, then the other side just kind of takes it and runs with it as, yes, you are wrong, and I'm right, and I win the argument.
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you. I appreciate, and again, it's good to have these responses because what I'm trying to communicate, I don't know if I'm communicating effectively, and then the implications. What are the implications of this? So if someone said that to me, remember how I'm wired, hopefully I would say it nicely. I'd say, and guess what, friend? And you could be wrong too. And if we're not willing to admit that, we're not really entering into a meaningful conversation. So, yeah, I'm not allowing views to be sabotaged, but I'm wanting the conversation to go forward. So even like I work a lot with people of other faith traditions. Latter-day Saints, I work closely with Latter-day Saints, and I'm an evangelical Christian. I hold very strongly to what's called Chalcedonian Christology, and we don't agree. I work a lot with Zen Buddhists and pagans, and those are some of my dearest relationships. We don't agree. I have a book, reissue, coming out on evangelical Zen with a Buddhist priest. We didn't agree. He passed away. We didn't agree. But we still had strong core relational ties. And so the point I'm getting at here is that with all these things, I think I can hold firmly to my convictions. I can hold firmly to the relationship. And I think my hope is that they too will hold firmly to their convictions and hold firmly to the relationship. And we're all going in pursuit of truth, not pursuit of me, not in pursuit of them. Truth is outside of us. We're trying to go in pursuit of the truth together. That's my starting point. That's my ending point. And those are rules for conversation. So sometimes it's helpful to get the rules of discourse out on the table. We do that with presidential debates. I mean, we don't always hold to them, right? People start yelling at one another. But they have rules of discourse. We need to have rules of discourse. One of them is don't mock. And I hear this. I mean, I'll just be frank. I do not like the conspiracy theory of QAnon one bit. I'm really concerned about it. Some of you might like QAnon. I don't know. I don't know who I'm talking about. I'm just being honest with you. You can disagree with me. It's okay. That's part of the conversation. What I don't like is when I hear people outside of QAnon mocking it. We can have concerns about it, but don't mock it. Because what? Those who mock others, you'll be mocked too. So my point is, whatever the conspiracy, mocking never has a place in the body of Christ and shouldn't have a part of the common discourse. So I'm not going to allow someone to take control of the conversation, but I'm not going to allow for arrogance in myself to rule out. And I'm not afraid that they're going to win the conversation. That's just me. But it's a great question. We can keep talking about it later. It's phenomenal. Good point. Yes?
And slow to anger,
Yeah, James.
That's,
Quick to listen,
yeah.
slow to speak, slow to anger. And what does James say the greatest weapon of harm in the world is? Is it a nuclear warhead? It's the tongue. Yeah, it's a tough one, right? I mean, again, that's our challenge. It's our challenge. It's my challenge. So that's just a few points there on right reasoning. And you said it before, sir. It's attributed to Francis of Assisi, whether it's true of St. Francis, it fits his thinking. Seek to understand before being understood. That's hard for me. I've heard this about parenting. Someone said to a counselor, I could really teach my son a lot if he would just simply listen to me. Why can't we get this relationship figured out? He won't listen. I've known for a while now, slowly I came to the realization, if I don't learn to listen to my kids, the relationship's over. The relationship's over. And I'm really a guy who likes to fix problems. My wife and my daughter, they're not here tonight, but they'll say to me at times, I'm not asking you to fix my problems. I'm wanting you to listen. It's painful for me to listen to their pain. I want to fix the problem so I don't have to deal with the pain. I just want you to listen. I think that's part of the problem. But right reasoning, don't get personal or make it about personality. Stay on point. Pursue truth. Make points, not enemies. Right passions, and this is where I get into Jonathan Haidt. I'm going to read something from Jonathan Haidt. We still have time, don't we? How much time do we have? 2 hours? 3? Okay, good. Well, I like you. I'll go to your church. Right passions. So right reasons, not that we have them always, but I want to pursue them. Right passions, get to know the person and their passions. Get to know the person and their passions. That is so hard. That is so hard. I'm just thinking, I don't want to get to know them. They're wrong. I mean, believe me, I think this way, okay? I'm just saying I don't want to think this way. Yeah, I mean, I can think they're wrong. That's not a problem, as long as I'm willing to say I could be wrong too. But I need to get to know the person and their passions. I need to share a space with them to find common ground. Years ago, I was asked by this Buddhist community, Dharma Rain Zen Center in Portland, which, by the grace of God, have been able to develop some profound relationships that are life-giving, one of the main reasons why I love teaching in Portland. The culture wars. As I'm an evangelical Christian, there was a lot of anxiety and angst back in 2004 when President Bush won re-election and the gay ballot measure went the opposite direction of what the political and cultural left wanted. And I had people from the Oregonian and other newspapers coming to me and saying, so the evangelical vote, where's it going? I said, how would I know? I mean, I'm not a statistician. But they want to know, okay, how are evangelicals going to know? Because that's a big lobby group, et cetera, in Washington politics. And I started working with this Buddhist priest, Kyogen Carlson, after the Kendra James fatal shooting by a white police officer, and there was a national group coming in back in 2003. We started connecting after that. And after the gay ballot measure did not go forward as hoped on the left, he said, could you come and speak in my Buddhist community? And that was written up in the Tricycle magazine, the Buddhist, it's a Buddhist periodical. And so I went to speak in 2005 at this point, after the presidential election. And they asked me, all they asked me to do was speak about compassion from a biblical vantage point. That's what they asked me to do. To give some examples, so I spoke about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, I went to Jesus, I went to John Perkins, a mentor of mine, and I talked about these figures. A Buddhist, former Christian, met a lot of former Christians at Dharma Rain. A Buddhist said to me, if anyone has a corner on compassion, after I got done with my little talk on compassion, it should be you guys with your belief that Jesus came down from heaven to identify with us in our brokenness. What happened? And since that time, we've been doing potlucks. We did a potluck at the Dharma Rain. We've been doing potlucks. Not platforms, but potlucks, because everyone brings a dish to share. And Sally Tisdale, look her up, she's a phenomenal author. She said in this article, she goes, you know, these evangelicals, they were smarter than we thought. A lot of them are Reed grads. I mean, they're brilliant people. And we as evangelicals thought these Buddhists are actually funnier than we thought. We didn't think they were funny. They're Buddhists. I mean, well, they be, you know, they're wearing robes, and I mean, how can they be funny, right? And they're funnier than we thought. We started getting to know one another, and we shared potluck dinners. I think that's a great strategy, because potlucks, and the Buddhist priest came up with it. I didn't. And it was risky because he brought me, the evangelical creep, into his Buddhist community, which was a threatening situation because they were losing in the culture wars. To use Ted Hager's, like, we're winning this war, he said. Problematic language to me, what Ted Haggard said as the head of the National Association of Evangelicals. Jesus is not trying to win that war. He's not trying to take back America. He's not trying to take back Jerusalem. He's trying to lay down his life for Jerusalem and America and such. So, potlucks. What's the difference between a platform and a potluck? A potluck, people bring a favorite dish to share, and it leads to open discourse.
We don't need the definition in the Lutheran.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. But I thought it was a brilliant move on his part. And Sally Tisdale said, evangelicals and Buddhists said to one another, you like noodle salad? We like noodle salad. I mean, this isn't rocket science. Now, she's a brilliant author. But the point was, this isn't rocket science. But we could use a little bit of potlucks in our society more so today with people who don't share our views. So whatever church you belong to, maybe, and this is just crude, do some potlucks with your community where everyone brings a favorite dish to share. And I need to make sure I'm getting to know the person and their passions. You know how many times I've been in public settings and I've gotten into some kind of intense situation. I had a debate with a Buddhist philosopher at a university in Portland. And he tried to, and again, brilliant philosopher. I'm not going to mention his name. He said to me, here's the conversation stopper question. And he tried to shut down the conversation. It was a public forum. It was supposed to be a public debate. And he said, this is the conversation. He was trying to shut it down. But afterwards, his wife came up to me and said, and it didn't get shut down. The point is to keep the conversation going, not shut it down. So whatever our views, keep the conversation going so that we get to know people. But his spouse came up to me afterwards and said, and again, I'm not saying I'm wired this way. A lot of people were praying that I wouldn't screw it up. You're probably praying right now I don't screw it up because this is pretty amazing. She said, thank you for respecting my husband. He hasn't received a lot of respect from evangelicals in the past. Now, I had no idea. And again, I'm not saying that I'm so virtuous. I'm not. But the point was, I had no idea. I was just thinking rationality. And there was a lot more than reasoning going on underneath the surface. And that's true of all of us. All of us come into this room sizing ourselves up. Where are we? How do I fit in? Trying to be secure. I mean, I know that's my struggle. We're navigating that all the time. If we're honest with ourselves, do I fit in? How do I fit in? Do I not look like an idiot? Those are affections. That's not reasoning per se. So that's going to take me into this point about get to know the person, their passions. Have a potluck. You like noodle salads? I like noodle salads. Who would have thought? Share space, find common ground. So we've done softball games with the Buddhists. They like softball. Who would have thought? They like people. Who would have thought? I thought I was the only person I'm a Christian. I like people. No one else likes people. What am I talking about? I think it's in neuroscience right now. People tend to feel if someone puts a knife or a screwdriver into a hand, we tend to feel the pain of the person if it's someone of our own ideological, social context. We don't feel it as much if it's someone of another group. I don't think I am pained enough when Muslims die by tragedy. When Christians die or Americans die, I feel it. Now, some of that's our in-group dynamics. It might be evolutionary. But I should feel the pain of a Muslim because they're a fellow human. But do I really think they're a fellow human? I sure hope I do. But I'm just being honest. We tend to think we're more human than others. So these are deep heart problems for all of us. They're my problem. They're my problem. I'm good at this stuff. I really am. But I got a hell of a long way to go. Well, just give me another one, and there'll be more sugar to go. Okay, so that point. Jonathan Haidt. And I'd encourage you to read his book, The Righteous Mind. Some of you are nodding your heads. It sounds like you're familiar with him. TED Talks he gives. He did one on empathy back in 2016 with the political situation. You know, Hillary's people were calling, or Hillary called Donald's people despicable. He would call her people or people like her disgusting. Both are deeply problematic terms. And Haight says we got to do better than that. So Haight says part of our problem, he says this came to a head in 16. I think it's worse than in 2016, to be honest with you. And this is what I say, and I think it's across the spectrum. I don't think it's a one side. I don't blame one group, I blame all of us. I blame myself. What am I doing to help correct the problem? What are you doing to help correct the problem? So Haight says back in 2016 on a TED Talk about empathy, you could Google it. He says 3 reasons why we're in this mess culturally with this despicable and disgusting are 3 reasons he gives. The passing of the greatest generation. I don't know if any of you are, I don't think you are, you're too young for this. My parents were part of the greatest generation. My parents died, my dad several years ago in his 80s, my mom a few years ago in her 90s. They were part of the greatest generation. My dad still to this day can't eat, to this day, when he was alive, couldn't eat margarine, hated macaroni and cheese. Because in the Depression, the troops got the butter, they got the margarine in Illinois. And it wasn't margarine like we had. I thought, what's wrong with margarine? What's wrong with macaroni and cheese? But for him, it was like, we do it for the troops. We compromise for the troops. It's learning to compromise for the greater good. Haight says, Jonathan Haidt, some say Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, H-A-I-D-T, says the greatest generation was about the greater good, not simply their good. The greater good, the common good, not just their good. Boomers, boomer, millennial, I don't know. I grew up, my parents, who were Republican, still gave me this kind of JFK quote. How many of you remember the JFK quote? Because I was born in 64. Yeah. Right after his death, right? Yeah. You just said it. What is it? Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. That's Haight's point. It wasn't just the greatest generation, but it's like that was something that in many circles may be lost. We need to regain it. Not my good, but our collective good. Not my subgroup's good, but our collective good. Also the partisan purging. I think it started with Newt Gingrich, but it's not just a Republican phenomenon. I think it's on all sides. The partisan purging. John, blanking out, senior moment here. Oh no, the Arizona senator, the moderate, McCain. I still remember when Mitch McConnell was so frustrated with him on Affirmative Care Act. Regardless of what you think, this is not about what you think about these issues. I'm just talking about McCain's posture. And he sided against the Republicans. And I remember Mitch McConnell's frustration. He was a maverick, McCain, right? He was a maverick. And again, you can't say he wasn't American. For crying out loud. War hero, right? Look at his suffering. He wasn't a loser. Contrary to what some might say. He's the ultimate winner. But I like McCain's attitude that was more than just partisanship. Am I making sense? Am I making sense? And I don't mean this. I'm not trying to poke bears here or cub bears or whatever. I'm just saying that I like McCain's attitude to move beyond the partisan divide. That's my only point. But the partisan purging, do you know of anyone in politics today, and there are many, no doubt, who are desirous to try and bring people together from left and right and anywhere in between? It's hard to find. Pray that doesn't mean we have to sacrifice our convictions, but we have to try and work together. We have to. Impersonal disengagement on social media. Lincoln and Douglas. Now, this is a long time ago. We can't go back to those days. That's 59 maybe, or before. How many hours did I say? 14. I think that's a fact. They took breaks, but 14 hours. We tend to do social media in a way like, how many likes will I get for this post? How much reaction can I get to this response? That impersonal disengagement. I think Facebook's a good thing. I think Twitter can be a good thing. I mean, all these things have their place. They're tools, but it's what we do with them. There's got to be potlucks that undergird. If we replace the potlucks with the social media, we're screwed. That is not meant as a substitute. Otherwise, we're in big trouble. Okay, passivity won't do either, but proactive understanding. So here's Jonathan Haidt's moral intuitions. Please make note of them, and please look them up. Moral foundations theory. Laura, do I have a little bit more time? I'm looking at Laura because she's nicer. 5 minutes? 5 minutes. See, this is the problem. I was looking for Lincoln and Douglas. Okay, so look this up. Care harm, fairness, anti-cheating, loyalty betrayal, authority subversion, sanctity degradation, liberty oppression. He has 6 moral intuitions that he's done analysis of, where he says liberals are really about, generally speaking, and he's a liberal, but care over against harm, fairness over against cheating. So care, fairness. So you see that with the immigration discussion. Care for the undocumented migrant, or whatever. Fairness, equity. Now, we can say that's debated. I'm just saying, I'm just using that as an example. We could talk about abortion. Conservatives are more broad-based, and a lot of liberals don't like this, but Haidt says this. He says, and he's a liberal, but he says, conservatives actually have a broader span of moral intuitions. But big for conservatives are loyalty, authority, sanctity, liberty. Now, hopefully during the discussion I can come back to these, because Ethan said I only have 10 minutes. You're not being very fair, Ethan. You're not being very caring. I feel oppressed. One of Haidt's moral intuitions. See, I fight unfairly. But I want to come back to those things. But for Haidt, or Haidt, however you want to say his name, one of the questions he would say is, what am I missing? What am I missing? So like on a debate, whether it's abortion, and hopefully we can come back to abortion and immigration. I'd like to come to those. What am I missing in the discussion? Wherever I stand on the spectrum, I don't think I have a full spectrum of the important issues in play on any issue, because these are complex issues. Immigration reform, and I'll give you an example with immigration. I think that's a helpful example. But what am I missing? What might the other be missing? And I hope we can all think, what might I be missing? Where are my blind spots? Yeah, but I mean, we all need to be educated, right? So we're all blind in some ways. That's his point. We're self-righteous. We think we know more than we really do. And I need to think what I might be missing. And he talks about it by way of the emotions. What are those intuitions that drive me more than reason, like fairness or care or loyalty or authority or purity or liberty? He says we are wired by our affections or emotions more than we are by our reasoning. I think we should seek to be rational and adjudicate toward truth, but it's not as easy as we think. Okay, I hope we come back to that, Ethan, since you won't allow me more to... I'm being really nasty. Okay, I admit that. Thank you for putting up with me. Right practice, my last point. Okay, and then we're going to open it up further. So I've talked about right reasons, right passions, right practice. These are principles, okay, that I'm trying to live by. I'm not saying I'm good at, but I'm trying to live by. Don't treat the person I'm engaging as a means to the end of proving I'm right and they're wrong. Immanuel Kant, famous philosopher, said, do not view the other as a mere means to an end, but as an end in themselves. Every person is an end in themselves. You are an end, you are an end. You're not the end, you are an end in yourself. I don't want to use you to make my point. Does that make sense, where we treat people as props or tools or instruments? That's what our society does. Our society's messed up on the left and the right, right and left, because we all tend to treat people as means to an end rather than ends in themselves, because we're persons, we're not things. So with that, as I said earlier, we need to be about winning not simply a battle, but what the war. But what's the war? The war is not proving I'm right. I have a pastor friend at Beaverton Foursquare, pretty big church of several thousand over in Beaverton. Pastor friend of mine who's white, an engineer by trade, is a pastor, missional outreach pastor globally for Beaverton Foursquare, said, we're white, we're right, and we're afraid of anything, not us. I appreciated the humility. And he's trying to grow on understanding racial justice. And it's been very painful for him and for me. So what is the war I'm trying to win? Dr. King's war was that at the end of the day, instead of us being enemies, we become friends. You know what separates Islam from Christianity? And this is not his point against Islam. It's not like the general who spoke in Portland at a church, mega church several years ago. He said, the reason why we're winning this war is because our God is bigger than theirs. That general did not understand Christianity. I'll put it that way. The difference between Jesus and Muhammad is Jesus had to be delivered from the cross as a true prophet according to Islam, because a true prophet could not die on a cross. Muhammad is more successful. He went into Mecca successfully. Jesus would have been a loser. But Jesus was about enemy love. Islam will talk about care for the, but enemy love, if that's really what Christianity is about, if that's the heart of it, I'm not trying to win some battle over against someone. It's like Dr. King said. At the end of the day, you who are my enemy trying to kill my people, when we win this war, we win it where we win you over, and it's the beloved community. That's the war we're trying to win. Because what did God say to us about holiness? A lot of Christians in my circles want to be holy. What is holiness? To love our enemies as ourselves, not like the pagans who just love their friends. That's a challenge to me, because I love my friends. I don't like my enemies. That's why they're my enemies. But he tells me to love my enemies. That's the war we're trying to win. No other war than that. Making right, it's not about getting even. It's not proving I'm right. It's about making whole. Making whole is what Jesus is about. Okay, we will open it up for discussion, as this is my last time with you tonight. Tonight. Seriously, thank you for being such good listeners. You really apply in the book of James. Now, I'll try to apply the book of James and be quick to listen, slow to speak, etc. And I hope we can go to those case studies if there's time.
Hello, hello.
I find one of the biggest challenges is information being taken in. We could talk about a liberal friend of mine, I'm a conservative, we could talk about a subject and have absolutely no intersection of information, because where they're getting their news and what they're listening to and they're taking in does not intersect at all with the news I take in or that I'm involved in. And I think that disconnect of common information, my friends always laugh at me. I always say, I blame the media. I blame the media. There is the complete disconnect of information. But you're right. The bottom line is, do we have a relationship? And do we love each other? And we remind each other that we love each other. But there is no common ground in terms of what we believe or hear is happening.
Well, do you think, I mean, I know some, I've watched CNN and MSN and Fox, where I've seen, those are just three examples, right? And they're kind of across the spectrum, in different ways. I have seen news anchors who bring on, not as a prop, but bring on, I don't see it often, but bring on people of a position that doesn't reflect the news station and really try and understand. I really appreciate that when I see that at Fox and CNN and MSN. For example, Jim Lehrer NewsHour, and he passed away, right? But PBS, Jim Lehrer NewsHour, that was a great news hour. He brought in people from different perspectives, and there was a more robust dialogue. I think we have to foster that, because you know what? If you don't like it as a consumer and you protest enough, whether it's Turner or Murdoch or whoever, they're going to cater at some point to the consumer. So yes, the news stations are wrong at times, and maybe they're just simply catering to what we want. I'm not saying that's what you want, but I think I'm also at fault. I think I'm at fault. I don't think I'm making enough clear my own positions on the kind of news I want. So I have to go and find those news. I have to go and listen to others. I don't know. What do you think, Jill? What do you think? I mean, I'm not trying to dictate on that point. What do you think? Think I'm full of it? You can say it.
No, I don't think you're full of it.
You can say it.
But thanks for the opportunity. I could have said that.
You're going to say it. You're standing up.
No, my point was that you have to take some personal responsibility, though. Because there's different vendors of information out there. And too many Americans want to blame it on, well, I watch Channel 2, so it's all their fault. Oh, there's nothing to keep you from turning the channel to CNN, to Fox, to 12, whatever it is. Then you take the personal responsibility of reading different newspapers, listening to different channels on the radio and on TV, so that you make sure you get a variety.
Yeah, I have to do that more. I'm not good at that. I need to do it more.
Too many Americans want it spoon-fed to them, and they're going to blame someone else because they're not being responsible to go out there and gather information from different perspectives.
Well, just my last point,
Yeah.
and then I'll turn over the microphone, is I think it was this morning on the news, there was a news commentator was saying that 30-year-old and younger, the majority of them get their news off TikTok. So, does anyone else, from the grumbling, I think other people see this as a problem. But I see this as a huge problem, is where are we getting our information? Where are we getting our news? Can we even have a conversation if TikTok is providing the information? I just see this as a huge problem.
Where was that found? Because that's helpful to me to know. I need to study that more. That's helpful, though. I need to reflect on that. Well, I get I only have cable, so I have to get it from internet too. Are you saying I'm one of the younger generation? Thank you. That's very kind. You're very gracious, and you haven't compromised the point in any of that. Who, me? Yeah, but I use the internet. I Google and I find news stations. It's amazing. I can find it. I created the internet. So, no, this is a problem for me. I'll just use one example. It's an anecdote, but just to say that this is an ongoing problem. So I'm at the gym. This is was it right before COVID? And I'm up on the treadmill, and a news station is on, and I just wanted to see, it was a major event, and I turn away to try and figure out, okay, which Nirvana song do I want to listen to next? And when I look up, the station's been changed, and I see the staff person from the gym going. I said, what were you doing? I was watching that. She said, the gentleman next to you, older gentleman than me, wanted a different station. I was livid. And I turned to him and I said, I was watching. He said, that crap? I said, well, I think what you're watching is crap. And then I thought, crap, I have to give a talk on the Beatitudes tomorrow at church. And there I go again. And I said, and again, it's just like, it was because I wanted to be self-righteous. Okay, sir, I'm sorry. Let's watch what you want to watch. But, and we actually developed rapport. We developed a friendship. I don't think we agree on anything. But we both have an interest in being healthy. He had several heart attacks and such. So we would talk. It can be done. Our politics are completely different. But we had a friendship. I know he's the only one I know at the gym.
Can you review the points that you gave? You have 3.
Well, I talked about politics matter, Jesus is political, and then I got into right reasons, right passions, and right practice.
Does anybody have any questions with those 3 points?
I'd love to get into right passions more.
Any questions about right passions?
In your view, is it okay? Is it justifiable for a passion about something like the unborn to drive people? We hear some people say that abortion is the single issue that some people become single issue voters over, and in the past it's been the pro-life folks. And it seems like in the last 6 months, it has swung to the pro-choice folks. Is that a passion, do you think, that justifies people becoming single-issue voters over?
Yeah, personally, well, you know, I don't know how specific I want to get in my own, because my personal views don't per se matter. They're just more illustration of how I try and navigate anecdotally, you know, for the broader, more important conversation is how do we process? But I don't think any of us should be single-issue voters, whatever the issue. Whether it's abortion or environment, I think they're all interconnected. Actually, Pope John Paul II was very pro-life, but he was pro-all life. So what the Catholic Church's view is on capital punishment and incarceration is much more expansive than and I'm an evangelical Christian. I'll situate myself. I'll quote my mentor Joel Osteen, "Bloom where I'm planted." And so I would say that I need to make sure that I'm accounting for all the issues. Charles Marsh, University of Virginia, said about abortion, and he's probably pro-life, but he said there's a lot of pious patriots in the evangelical movement that are all about bringing the fetus to term. And I'm personally about bringing the fetus to term, okay? But it's complicated. I do think there are exceptions. But the very policies that would help lower the amount of abortions, a lot of conservatives are not concerned for, which I think just shoots conservatives in the foot. And I'm a pro-life guy. But I think being pro-environment, being pro-life across the spectrum is vital even for the well-being of the unborn. And then we have to deal with, what about the mother? I mean, why should it be about just the fetus? Why should it be supposedly just about the mother? And what about the policies that would support the mother to limit or lower even the desire for an abortion? I wish that that were more part of the political discourse in our country. It's not where it needs to be. And if we don't say the party line, whatever the party line is, pro-choice, pro-life, then we're seen as not righteous, whether liberal or conservative, because we're both thinking we're more righteous, and that's Haidt's point. And he's a liberal. But that's the point about blessed are the spiritually bankrupt. I'm in need. I could be wrong. I need to grow. I love your point, sir. I love the point that you're after here. Whether you agree with me or not, the point is, how do we adjudicate? I think you used the word, the justification for these views. And single voter issues is too myopic across the spectrum, whether it's environment or the unborn, et cetera, et cetera. We need to be more expansive in our ethical values. And I would hope, because, I mean, the Pope was more conservative than evangelicals. And he was saying we need to be pro-life, all life. So, in some ways, yeah, they're part of the ecosystem. No, it's good. It's good. Did I answer in some ways? I mean, just give my own take, right or wrong? What about immigration reform?
I'm all for immigration, and we immigrate over 1 million people a year into America, but we have hundreds of thousands of people just coming into the country. That's not immigration, that's invasion. And no matter how you spin it, it's against the law. It's not something that's supposed to happen, but it's happening, and many people, and recently, some politicians say we want to give them all amnesty. But I guarantee you, if the people that were coming across the border, hundreds of thousands, were going to vote Republican, they would not have that attitude.
Okay. So thank you, sir. I appreciate the honesty, and I think you really put it out there in a really helpful way. And I'm just trying to give a case study because I promised Pastor Dave and my friend Laura that I would get into these case studies. So even though Pastor Ethan doesn't want me to do it, I'm joking. Ethan, I like you. That's why I'm bantering, okay? If I banter with you, that means I like you. So no one likes me because I like to banter. It's my Chicago background. But I would like to get into the case study on that issue, and you put it right out there that really helps us discuss it. Sir, you had a comment. Stole your thunder. Okay, so I want to come back to, sir.
We applaud the Poles and the Hungarians and other countries in Europe who take in the Ukrainians because we understand the stress of the Ukraine at this point. But when it comes from a bunch of Mexicans or Central Americans coming across our border who are equally stressed by climate catastrophes in Central America, that's a different, we look at that differently.
Now, I think thank you, sir. Thank you. I think this is a helpful case study right here. That's what I want to get at. And I'm using the hate or Haidt's righteous mind scenario. I want to go to the evangelical immigration table. Okay, this is a document, and you can Google it. It's a fascinating case study. It was formed back, several years ago, maybe 8, 10, 12 years ago. Now, keep in mind what I said. Jonathan Haidt, if you could write these things down, I mentioned these before. If you wouldn't mind just writing them down. I talked about care for the other. Could you just write those down, please? This is from Moral Foundations Theory. Fairness. So care, fairness, loyalty. And you can look this up, Moral Foundations, and you'll see it. Moralfoundations.org. Care, fairness, loyalty. 3 separate categories. There's 3 more. Authority, number 4. Sanctity, number 5. Liberty, number 6. So liberty over oppression. Sanctity of life, sanctity over degradation. Authority over against oppression or subversion of order, subversion of authority. Loyalty over against betrayal. Fairness over against cheating. Care, not harm. So those are his foundations. Now, he's an evolutionary thinker. He thinks it's how we're wired. Whether you agree with evolution or not, that's where he's coming from. You don't have to agree with that to affirm his moral intuitions, wherever you're coming from across the spectrum. I want to apply it to the issue of immigration. If I could do that for just a few minutes, Pastor Dave, Pastor Ethan, is that okay? So the evangelical immigration table, I give you those 6 categories. You can look up moralfoundations.org. Try and keep those in mind, those 6. Did you get those 6? What were the 6? Okay, one more time. Care, not harm, number 1. 2, fairness, not cheating. 3, loyalty, not betrayal. So like loyalty to your country, not betrayal. Or loyalty to your group, not betrayal. 4, authority, not subversion of authority. 5, sanctity, not degradation of sanctity, holiness, whatever that might mean. And then lastly, liberty, not oppression. Okay, those are the 6. Now, I think that this is striking. The evangelical immigration table, which wasn't thinking about hate, brought my group, evangelical Christians, liberal evangelical, conservative evangelical together across the spectrum, and came up with these several years ago as a bipartisan effort for Christians. Their goal is for a bipartisan solution on immigration that, first, respects the God-given dignity of every person. 2, protects the unity of the immediate family. 3, respects the rule of law. 4, ensures fairness to taxpayers. 5, establishes a path toward legal status and/or citizenship for those who qualify and who wish to become permanent residents. So I'll say those again if that's helpful, because I don't have a PowerPoint on those. I ought to put these up. But respects the God-given dignity of every person. 2, protects the unity of the immediate family. 3, respects the rule of law. 4, guarantees secure national borders. 5, ensures fairness to taxpayers. 6, establishes a path toward legal status and/or citizenship for those who qualify and who wish to become permanent residents. The reason why I bring that up is I think it's an expansive view of how to approach the debate on immigration reform. Everyone believes, in one way or another, we need reform. We don't agree on what the reform is. Franklin Graham, who's a very conservative person, if you know who Franklin Graham is, Billy Graham's son, was very concerned about the policy under Jeff Sessions for separating families at the border. Because the family, call it the nuclear family, or et cetera, should not be separated. However, from the flip side, it also talks about what? Sanctity of law, respects the rule of law, guarantees secure national borders. So this is a bipartisan approach amongst Christians, evangelical Christians. It could have been Catholic and mainline Protestant. I'm just giving this example, just an example, case study, of moral intuitions, of affections, of our deep emotions of what we believe is right. And what I love about this is that I need to learn from conservatives and liberals, and even the response we just got. We just had a couple responses. I sensed responses that address conservative intuitions and more liberal convictions. I think we have to bring all of that to bear on the discussion. So, for example, if people are simply trying to use this country coming in to cause harm, well, I think that's a concern. I think we need to be about law and order. But we should also be about the human. Now, just one little caveat, if you don't mind, to your point, sir. I think America struggles with amnesia. I think we should have secure boundaries. Does that mean walls? I just think we need to have secure boundaries. I think we have amnesia as Americans regarding Latin America and South America. Now, you can disagree with me strongly on this. That's okay. I'm all for strong disagreement, as long as we also have a strong pursuit of connecting with one another. And I'm not going to mock you for your views. We might not agree. You might think I'm stupid, and that's, maybe I am. So I'm trying to model what I've been saying. But I think to have the dialogue is part of what's important. Very quickly, America has benefited at great cost to Latin and Central America. King said in his Vietnam War sermon, we have taken, in partnership with the landed gentry of Latin America, from the land of the people of these countries. We benefited and we didn't stay put, and we've absorbed, we have taken, and we don't stay there to build up. I think this was Friedman. His whole approach to capitalism, disaster capitalism in Chile. We're often not aware. Now, does that mean we shouldn't be about secure borders? We should. But if we have a relationship with people and we've used that country and benefited from that country, and they're coming here in part maybe because they've been destabilized. It's not that they're sucking it up from us. Maybe we've been sucking it up from them, and we have forgotten that. But that doesn't take away from the rightful concerns that more conservative people have had about people. We don't want people coming here who are trying to cause harm to the country, who are going to respect. I'm all for the DREAM Act, for people who wasn't their reason for coming. They were here as little children, and they're caught between two countries, and they have no land. I need to have that kind of compassion. But they still need to pursue citizenship. They need to be part of a citizenry that builds up America. I want to be both conservative and liberal, not wishy-washy. I want to have an expansive view of moral intuitions, because the solution is ultimately beyond me. And I don't think I've got it all figured out. I think together we have to figure it out. I think what you're concerned for, sir, and what you're concerned for, and you're concerned for, sirs, are all important as conversation points so that we can move toward a more effective, comprehensive solution that probably none of us quite agree with perfectly. It's not meant to be compromise, but it's to be comprehensive. So that's all I want to say. I think I got at my points.
Thank
But
you.
the point is, the conversation is more important.
So, Dr. Paul Metzger, let's give him a big thank you. So, first of all, is well-deserved food for Paul. Here you go.
Do I get a well-deserved beer?
Yes, you do. So, I want to do an invite so you don't forget this. So, we've done this 2 months already. And so I've received some good wisdom, and so we are now capitalizing on that wisdom from the people. That's you. So we are now doing what is called Bar Talk Rewind the week afterwards. So this will be next Tuesday, but it won't be in the bar, sorry. It will be just 2 doors down at the corner, just to be able to discuss, what we have learned here. And we'll do that at 6 o'clock next Tuesday at the corner. Anyone that would like to join in, you're more than welcome. We're just not serving beer, okay? So we'll do that each and every week. So please welcome us. You are welcome to be a part of that. So I want to say big thank you to here. This is 1933 Taproom. They host this place. Big thank you to Brian and those helpers here. You know, this was their day off. They have Monday and Tuesday off. So they opened this up and they set this up for you. So love on them, give tips, let them know that they are loved and appreciated here. And we're so glad that they're partnering with us in this ministry. And pray for Paul, too. His ministry is beyond Multnomah. It's obviously to his family and to his son. But it takes some risk to come and be with us and to have this type of conversation. So I pray that you've grown. I pray that you've been stretched. And if you'd like to come out for Bar Talk Rewind, it'll be next Tuesday at 6 o'clock, just a couple doors down at Community of Faith. So thank you for being here, and good night.